The morning sun peeked through the clouds as Min-ho wiped sweat from his brow. He looked across the fields of his small farm on Jeju Island with a heavy heart. Another season, another disappointment. The vegetables they had worked so hard to grow barely brought enough money to cover their costs. Next to him, his wife Jae-young silently calculated figures in a worn notebook, her face tense with worry. "We can't go on like this," she finally said, closing the notebook. "At this rate, we'll lose the farm by next year." Min-ho nodded, too tired to argue. 3 years of hard work, and they were still struggling to make ends meet. The couple had moved back to Jeju Island to take over the family farm after city jobs left them feeling empty. They had dreams of connecting with the land, of building something meaningful together. But farming had proven harder than they imagined. That evening, Min-ho's phone rang. His mother's voice trembled on the other end. "Your grandfather is in the hospital. You should come quickly." The old hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of machines. Min-ho sat beside his grandfather's bed, holding the old man's weathered hand. Despite his illness, grandfather's eyes lit up when he saw his grandson. "How is the farm?" the old man asked. Min-ho tried to sound positive, but his grandfather knew better. He had worked that same land for over 50 years. "Perhaps you're growing the wrong things," grandfather said softly. He motioned for Min-ho to come closer. "Let me tell you about the black pigs." For the next hour, as afternoon sunlight streamed through hospital windows, grandfather told stories about the special black pigs native to Jeju Island. These weren't ordinary pigs. Their meat was prized across Korea for its unique flavor and texture. In the old days, many families on Jeju raised these black pigs, but modern farming had nearly wiped them out. "People have forgotten what real pork tastes like," grandfather said. "The big companies raise white pigs that grow fast but have no flavor. Our Jeju black pigs take longer to grow, but the meat—" He closed his eyes, remembering. "There's nothing like it in the world." On the drive home, Min-ho couldn't stop thinking about his grandfather's stories. When he returned to the farm, Jae-young was waiting with dinner, but Min-ho barely touched his food. "What's wrong?" she asked. "How is your grandfather?" "He'll recover," Min-ho said. "But I can't stop thinking about something he told me." He explained about the black pigs, how they were part of Jeju's history and culture, how their meat was considered a delicacy. Jae-young looked skeptical. "But we don't know anything about raising pigs." Min-ho stayed up late that night, searching online for information about Jeju black pigs. What he discovered amazed him. The meat sold for 3 or 4 times the price of regular pork. Restaurants in Seoul specifically advertised dishes made with black pig meat, charging premium prices. There were even Japanese buyers willing to pay top dollar for authentic Jeju black pig. Over breakfast the next morning, Min-ho spread printouts across the table. "Look at these prices," he said, pointing to market reports. "And there aren't many farmers raising pure Jeju black pigs anymore. Most big farms use mixed breeds." Jae-young studied the papers, her expression changing from doubt to interest. "But starting a pig farm would cost money we don't have." "We could start small," Min-ho suggested. "Convert the old storage barn. Sell some equipment we don't need. Maybe get a small loan." That afternoon, they visited a neighboring village where an elderly farmer still kept a small herd of black pigs. The farmer, Mr. Song, laughed when they told him their plan. "You young people from the city want to raise black pigs. It's hard work. They're not like the factory pigs. They need space, good feed. They're stubborn, like Jeju people." He chuckled at his own joke. But he showed them his pigs, beautiful creatures with shiny black coats. They were smaller than modern pigs, but moved with a lively energy. Min-ho and Jae-young watched as Mr. Song fed them a mixture of sweet potatoes, local grains, and food scraps. "This is how we always fed them on Jeju," he explained. "It makes the meat taste special." Driving home, the couple was quiet, both thinking the same thing. It would be a huge risk. They knew nothing about raising pigs, but their current path was leading nowhere. "I think we should try," Jae-young finally said, reaching for Min-ho's hand. "What do we have to lose?" Min-ho squeezed her hand. "Let's visit grandfather tomorrow. He'll know where we can find good breeding stock." As they turned into their farm driveway, for the first time in months, Min-ho felt something new stirring in his heart. Not just hope, but excitement. Maybe, just maybe, these black pigs could save their farm and help them become part of Jeju's living history. The bank manager looked at their business plan with raised eyebrows. Black pigs? You want to learn to raise black pigs? He flipped through their papers again, shaking his head slightly. Min-ho and Jae-young exchanged nervous glances. This was their third bank this week, and they were beginning to lose hope. These heritage pigs are valuable, Min-ho explained, leaning forward. The meat sells for much more than regular pork. The manager tapped his pen on the desk. But you have no experience raising livestock. Your farm has only grown vegetables. My grandfather raised these pigs his whole life, Min-ho said. He'll guide us. After more discussion, they left with a loan, smaller than they'd hoped for, but enough to start. On the drive home, Jae-young was quiet. Are we crazy? She finally asked. We just sold our tractor and got into debt to buy pigs we don't know how to raise. Min-ho took her hand. Maybe a little crazy, but sometimes crazy works. The next day, they drove 3 hours to meet a farmer who still maintained a small herd of purebred Jeju black pigs. The old farm sat nestled between hills, looking much like farms had for centuries on the island. Mr. Kang, the owner, was a weathered man in his 70s. He walked with a slight limp as he led them to the pig enclosures. These pigs have been in my family for generations, he explained. Not many people want them anymore. Too much work, they say. The pigs were beautiful, sleek black bodies, alert eyes, and a certain dignity in their movements that surprised Min-ho. They weren't the lazy pink pigs he was used to seeing in pictures. After careful selection and negotiation, they purchased 6 pigs, 5 females and 1 male. It cost nearly half their loan money. Take good care of them, Mr. Kang said as they prepared to leave. They're not just animals, they're part of our island's soul. Getting the pigs home was their first challenge. The rented truck bounced over rough roads, and Min-ho worried constantly about the animals in back. When they finally arrived home, darkness had fallen. We need to get them settled, Jae-young said, pulling on work gloves. The old storage barn they had cleared out still needed work, but it would have to do for now. One by one, they coaxed the nervous pigs into their new home. The last female refused to move, squealing when they tried to guide her. She's scared, Min-ho realized. He remembered how his grandfather used to talk softly to animals. Kneeling beside the pig, he began speaking in a gentle voice, telling her about her new home, promising good food and kind treatment. To his surprise, she gradually calmed and followed him inside. That night, exhausted but unable to sleep, the couple sat at their kitchen table making lists of everything they needed to do. The fencing needs to be stronger, Jae-young said, and we need to learn about breeding cycles. Min-ho nodded, adding to his own list. We need to find sources for good feed. Grandfather said they need special food for the best meat quality. Just as they were about to go to bed, they heard a loud crash from the barn. Running outside with flashlights, they found one of the pigs had pushed through a weak spot in the temporary wall. It took an hour of searching before they found her rooting happily in their vegetable garden. Well, there goes our dinner for tomorrow, Jae-young said, but she was laughing as they guided the pig back to the barn. The next few weeks tested them as never before. They woke before dawn and worked until they could barely stand. Min-ho's grandfather, now recovered enough to sit outside, directed them from a chair, shouting instructions as they built proper enclosures and feeding areas. No, the sleeping area must be higher than the rest, he would call. They like to sleep dry. They learned quickly that black pigs were different from modern breeds. They needed more space and different food. When they tried commercial pig feed, the animals barely touched it. I told you, grandfather said. They need sweet potatoes, barley, food scraps. The old-fashioned diet makes the good meat. So they planted sweet potatoes, made deals with local restaurants for food scraps, and learned to ferment feed the traditional way. It was more work, but the pigs thrived. 1 month in, a powerful storm hit the island. At midnight, with rain pounding on the roof, they heard the wind tear part of the barn roof away. Without hesitation, they pulled on raincoats and rushed out into the howling wind. For hours, they worked side by side in the storm, holding tarps over the frightened pigs, reinforcing walls, bailing water. By morning, they were soaked, muddy, and exhausted. but all 6 pigs were safe. Jae-young looked at her husband, rain dripping from her hair. "I never thought I'd care so much about pigs," Min-ho smiled back. "Neither did I." And in that moment, despite all the hardships, they knew they had made the right choice. 8 months had passed since Min-ho and Jae-young brought their first black pigs home. The animals had grown healthy and strong. Several of the females had given birth, and now 23 pigs roamed in the expanded pens and outdoor areas they had built. The couple had mastered the daily routines of feeding, cleaning, and care. But a new problem faced them, finding buyers willing to pay premium prices. Another rejection, Min-ho sighed, hanging up the phone. He crossed another restaurant off their list. "They say our prices are too high. They can get regular pork for half the cost." Jae-young pushed a cup of tea toward him. "We can't lower our prices, the feed costs alone." Min-ho nodded. They had invested everything in these pigs. The special diet of sweet potatoes, local grains, and fermented feed wasn't cheap, but it was essential for the authentic flavor of Jeju black pig meat. "Maybe we need to find people who understand what makes this meat special," Jae-young suggested. The next day, Min-ho visited his grandfather. The old man listened to their problem, nodding thoughtfully. "There's someone you should meet," grandfather said. "Park Sung-min. We were young men together. He became a chef, studied in Seoul. Now his son runs a restaurant in the city, but the old man still works there. He knows food like no one else." Min-ho found the restaurant tucked away on a side street in Jeju City. It was small but elegant, with traditional decor. An elderly man was instructing a younger cook at the stove. When Min-ho introduced himself as his grandfather's grandson, Mr. Park's face lit up. "Young Kim's grandson. Come sit." The old chef insisted on serving Min-ho himself, bringing out dishes made with traditional ingredients. As they talked, Min-ho explained their black pig farm and the trouble finding buyers. Mr. Park's eyes sharpened. "True Jeju black pig? Not mixed breeds?" Min-ho nodded. "Purebred. We feed them the traditional way too." The old chef stood stubbornly. "Show me. Take me to your farm." The next day, Mr. Park spent hours examining their pigs, asking detailed questions about their feed and care. Finally, he cut a small piece of meat from one of their recently processed pigs, cooking it simply on a portable burner he had brought. He closed his eyes as he tasted it. When he opened them again, they were shining. "This," he said, "is what pork is supposed to taste like. The flavor, the texture. This is what we've lost. Today's meat has no character, no story." He explained how in traditional Korean cooking philosophy, hansik, ingredients carried both flavor and meaning. Black pig meat was prized not just for taste, but for its connection to history and place. "People have forgotten," Mr. Park said. "We must remind them." Together, they formed a plan. Mr. Park's son's restaurant would feature dishes made from Min-ho's black pigs, but more importantly, Mr. Park would help organize a special dinner event at the farm itself. "People must see where their food comes from," he insisted. "They must understand the connection between the land, the animal, and the plate." For 2 weeks they prepared. Jae-young cleaned and decorated their farmhouse. Min-ho built long tables under the trees. They invited restaurant owners, food writers, and local dignitaries. Mr. Park planned a 7-course meal showcasing black pig meat in traditional and modern preparations. The evening of the dinner, Min-ho was nervous. What if no one comes? He whispered to Jae-young as they lit lanterns along the path to the dining area. But they came, 28 guests, curious about this unusual farm dinner. As twilight fell, Min-ho welcomed them, his voice shaky at first, then growing stronger as he spoke about their journey and the pigs they had come to respect. "Before you ate," he said, "we want you to meet where your food comes from." He led them on a tour of the farm, showing how they raised the pigs with room to move, access to outdoors, and special feed. The guests asked questions, took photos, seemed genuinely interested. Then came the meal. Mr. Park had outdone himself. Each dish highlighted different qualities of the meat, its tenderness, flavor, perfect fat distribution. As they ate, the old chef explained each preparation and its connection to Korean culinary traditions. A food blogger closed her eyes as she tasted. "The difference is incredible," she said. "It's like tasting real pork for the first time." The owner of a luxury hotel nodded. My customers would pay well for this quality. They're tired of food with no story, no soul. As the evening ended, Min Ho and Jia Young could hardly believe what had happened. 5 restaurants had placed orders. The hotel wanted a regular supply. 2 food writers promised articles about their farm and the rediscovery of authentic flavor. Mr. Park patted Min Ho's shoulder as guests departed. This is just the beginning. People are hungry for real food, for connection to tradition. What you're doing here matters. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Min Ho and Jia Young sat beneath the stars, too excited to sleep. Do you remember when that pig escaped and destroyed our vegetable garden? Jia Young asked, laughing. How could I forget? You were so mad. And now look at us. She gestured to the farm around them. Who would have thought pigs would save our farm? And not just any pigs. Black pigs, Min Ho finished. Grandfather was right. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the occasional grunts from the barn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, scaling up production, maintaining quality, balancing supply and demand. But tonight, for the first time since they'd begun their farming journey, the future looked not just possible but bright. Word spread quickly after the farm dinner. The food blog posts went viral, shared thousands of times with mouth-watering photos of Mr. Park's black pig dishes. Local TV featured a short segment about the young couple reviving Jeju's heritage breeds. For a few wonderful weeks, Min Ho and Jia Young could barely keep up with orders. Then, just as suddenly, the orders slowed. I don't understand, Jia Young said, checking their phone messages again. Last week, that new restaurant in the tourist district wanted 20 calories per month. Now they've cancelled. Min Ho frowned. The hotel order is still good, right? Yes, but they've asked for a lower price. The next day, Min Ho visited one of the restaurants that had cancelled their order. The owner, Mr. Lee, seemed uncomfortable when Min Ho asked why. Look, Mr. Lee finally said, leading Min Ho to the kitchen's walk-in cooler. He pointed to packages of meat labeled Premium Black Pig. I can get this for 30% less than your price. The supplier says it's the same thing. Min Ho examined the packaging. May I see the meat? Mr. Lee unwrapped one package. The meat was darker than regular pork, but Min Ho immediately noticed differences from his pig's meat. The marbling pattern was wrong, the color not quite the deep red-brown of true Jeju black pig. This isn't pure Jeju black pig, Min Ho said quietly. It might be a mixed breed or black pigs raised on commercial feed. Mr. Lee shrugged. My customers can't tell the difference. The menu just says black pig. Driving home, Min Ho felt sick. Their special product, raised with such care, was being undercut by cheaper imitations. Back at the farm, he explained what he discovered to Jia Young. So we're competing against fake black pig meat? She asked, her face tense. Not fake exactly. Just not what we're selling. Not heritage breed. Not traditionally raised. They sat at the kitchen table, the familiar spot for all their big decisions. Outside, evening was falling, and they could hear the soft grunting of pigs settling down for the night. We need to help people understand the difference, Jia Young said finally. Show them why our meat is worth more. The next morning, they called an emergency meeting with their 3 closest farm neighbors, all small-scale producers who had started raising black pigs after seeing Min Ho and Jia Young's early success. We're all facing the same problem, said Mrs. Cho, the oldest of the group. My restaurant customers are asking for lower prices too. We should work together, suggested Mr. Han, who had converted his chicken farm to black pigs last year. Maybe form a cooperative. For hours, they discussed ideas around Min Ho and Jia Young's kitchen table. By afternoon, they had a plan. They would create the Jeju Heritage Black Pig Association with strict standards for breed purity and raising methods. Their pigs would receive certification, and their packaging would feature a special seal. But certification required proof. For 2 weeks, Min Ho researched genetics testing. The cost was high, but necessary. When the tests confirmed their pigs were indeed purebred Jeju black pigs, they had their first piece of evidence. Next came documentation of their raising methods. Jia Young created detailed records of their feeding practices, showing how they'd followed traditional methods. She took photos of their spacious pens and outdoor areas, contrasting them with images of industrial pig farms. They also needed to show the difference in the meat itself. Mr. Park helped them organize a blind taste test with several prominent chefs. The results were clear. In side-by-side comparisons, the traditionally raised black pig meat won every time. Armed with this evidence, the newly formed association created brochures, videos, and a website explaining the unique qualities of authentic Jeju black pig meat. They visited restaurants together, gave talks at food festivals, and offered samples to influential food writers. But their most effective strategy came from an unexpected source: grandfather's old stories. "When I was a boy," he had told Min-ho, "every family on Jeju knew their local pig farmer. People understood that good meat came from well-raised animals." Inspired by this, Min-ho and Jae-young started a Know Your Farmer campaign. They invited restaurant customers to visit their farm, see how the pigs lived, and learn about traditional raising methods. They created cards with photos of their farm to display on restaurant tables. They encouraged chefs to tell the story of their meat when serving dishes. Slowly, things began to change. Restaurants proudly advertised certified Jeju heritage black pig on their menus. Customers began asking where meat came from, how it was raised. A major food critic wrote about the unmistakable difference in flavor and texture between authentic heritage black pig and industrial imitations. One evening, 6 months after forming the association, the 4 farm families gathered at Min-ho and Jae-young's farm to celebrate their progress. They had weathered the challenge and emerged stronger. Their prices remained higher than the competition, but now customers understood why and were willing to pay. As they shared a meal made from their own pigs, cooked by Mr. Park himself, Mr. Han raised his glass. "To black pigs," he said, "and to farmers who refused to compromise." After everyone had gone home, Min-ho and Jae-young walked through their farm in the moonlight. The pig herd had grown. They now had 64 animals, with plans for more. "Do you think we'll ever get to a point where things are easy?" Jae-young asked. Min-ho laughed. "Probably not. But would we want that?" Jae-young smiled, thinking of how far they had come from those first scared, inexperienced farmers with 6 pigs and too many dreams. "No," she said. "I don't think we would." 3 years into their journey, Min-ho stood at the edge of their property, watching the sunrise over what had become a proper farm. From their original 6 pigs, they now had a thriving operation with 40 breeding sows and several boars. Their annual revenue had reached $850,000, not yet the dream of becoming millionaires, but a remarkable achievement from where they'd started. "Coffee?" Jae-young appeared beside him, offering a steaming mug. Her hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her work clothes were already dusty from the morning chores. "Thanks." He took the mug, wrapping his hands around its warmth. "I was just thinking about how much has changed." She nodded, looking out at the farm. "Remember when we thought 20 pigs was a lot?" They both laughed. Those early days seemed so distant now. Inside their farmhouse, spread across the dining table, were documents from a large meat distributor. The company wanted to contract with them for a substantially larger supply than they currently produced, a potentially life-changing opportunity. "We need to decide," Jae-young said, nodding toward the house. "They're expecting our answer this week." Min-ho sighed. "I know." The offer had triggered weeks of discussion between them. To meet the volume the distributor wanted, they would need to significantly expand their operation. This meant more land, more buildings, more pigs, and potentially changes to how they raise their animals. "Let's walk the farm," Min-ho suggested. "Clear our heads before we decide." They strolled through the operation they had built together. The first pen housed their original breeding stock, now older but still productive. Min-ho patted the oldest sow, who had been among their first 6 pigs. "Old lady," he said affectionately, "you started all this." In the next area, younger sows and their piglets roamed in family groups. Unlike factory farms where pigs were crammed into small spaces, their animals had room to move, to root in the soil, to behave like pigs should. The piglets raced around, playing chase games while their mothers watched. Beyond that were the growing pens where juvenile pigs lived until they reached market weight. These outdoor areas rotated seasonally, allowing the land to recover between groups of pigs. "If we take this deal," Jae-young said quietly, "we'll have to change how we do things." Min-ho nodded. The The distributor had been clear. To produce the volume they wanted at a price they considered reasonable, the Kims would need more efficient methods. More pigs in smaller spaces, less outdoor access, more standardized feed instead of their traditional, labor-intensive diet. It would mean a lot more money, Minho acknowledged. We could pay off all our loans, maybe even buy the Lee property next door. But it wouldn't be the same pork, Jiayang said. Not really. They completed their walk in silence, each lost in thought. Back at the house, they sat at their kitchen table, the place where all their major decisions happened. What would grandfather say? Jiayang asked. Minho smiled sadly. His grandfather had passed away 6 months earlier, peacefully in his sleep. His last visit to the farm had been a happy one, seeing how his stories about black pigs had transformed into this thriving business. He'd tell us to trust the pigs, Minho said. That's what he always said, remember? The pigs know what they need. Listen to them. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Professor Yoon from the Agricultural University, right on time for her monthly visit. For the past year, she had been documenting their traditional raising methods as part of a research study on heritage breed preservation. Come in, Professor, Jiayang welcomed her. Would you like some tea? As they shared tea, the professor updated them on her research findings. The nutritional analysis of your pork compared to industrial pork is remarkable, she explained, showing them charts on her tablet. Higher omega-3 fatty acids, different protein structures. It's scientifically measurable, not just subjective taste. Minho and Jiayang exchanged glances. This was valuable information. We're actually at a crossroads, Minho admitted, explaining the distributor's offer. Professor Yoon listened thoughtfully. This is the challenge all successful small farms eventually face, she said. Grow bigger and change your methods, or stay small and special. What would you do? Jiayang asked. The professor smiled. I'm a researcher, not a farmer. But I can tell you that from what I've observed, your success comes from what makes you different. The moment you become like everyone else, why would people pay more for your product? After she left, they returned to the kitchen table. She's right, Jiayang said. Our whole story is about doing things the traditional way. Minho nodded slowly. So we don't take the distributor deal. But that still leaves the question of how to grow. Maybe we don't need to produce more pigs, Jiayang suggested. Maybe we need to get more value from each pig we raise. That night, they sketched a new plan. Instead of scaling up volume, they would scale up quality and efficiency. They'd invest in a small processing facility right on their farm to create specialty products, cured meats, sausages, ready-to-cook cuts that would bring higher prices than raw meat alone. For efficiency, they'd use technology where it didn't compromise quality. Automated feeding systems that still delivered their traditional feed recipes. Monitoring systems to track animal health without constant human presence. A hybrid housing system that maintained the pigs' access to outdoors while protecting the environment from overgrazing. The next morning, Minho called the distributor and politely declined their offer. Instead, he proposed a smaller arrangement for a premium line of specialty products at a higher price point. They seemed interested, he told Jiayang afterward. Not as much volume, but they said some of their high-end customers might pay for a truly premium product with a good story behind it. That evening, a university van pulled up to their farm. Professor Yoon emerged with 3 students. We'd like to propose a research partnership, she explained. Your farm would be our living laboratory for sustainable heritage breed production. We provide technical support, analysis, and student labor in exchange for studying your methods. Minho and Jiayang looked at each other. It wasn't the straightforward growth the distributor had offered. It would be more complex, more nuanced. But it felt right. We'd be honored, Jiayang told the professor. As the sun set over their farm, Minho put his arm around his wife's shoulders. So we're really doing this, growing our way, not their way? Jiayang nodded. Our way. The path ahead would be challenging, but they had faced challenges before and emerged stronger. Now they would grow with integrity, balancing tradition with innovation, staying true to the black pigs that had changed their lives. The envelope sat unopened on the kitchen table. The logo of Grand Palace Hotels was stamped in gold in the corner. Minho and Jiayang stared at it, hardly daring to touch it. You open it, Jae-young said, pushing it toward her husband. Min-ho shook his head. No, you. You're the one who talked to their chef at the food festival. 3 weeks earlier, Jae-young had represented their farm at a major food festival in Seoul. The executive chef from Grand Palace Hotels, a luxury chain with properties across Asia, had spent an unusually long time at their booth, asking detailed questions about their black pigs. He had taken her business card, but neither of them had expected anything to come of it. Yet here was a letter delivered by special courier. Together, Jae-young decided. She slid her finger under the flap as Min-ho leaned in close. The letter was written on heavy paper, formal but warm in tone. The hotel chain was expanding their farm-to-table program, seeking exclusive suppliers of premium ingredients for their high-end restaurants. They had been impressed by the Kim's commitment to traditional methods and the exceptional quality of their pork. Would they be interested in becoming an exclusive supplier for all 8 Grand Palace properties in Japan? At the bottom was a number, the price per kilogram they were prepared to pay. Jae-young gasped. That's almost double what we get now, she whispered. Min-ho read the letter again, more slowly this time. This could change everything. But, he frowned. They want consistent supply year-round. With our current breeding cycle, we have seasonal highs and lows. Over the next few days, they calculated what it would take to meet the hotel's needs. The volume was substantial. It would require increasing their production by at least 60%. The consistent year-round supply presented an even bigger challenge. Their traditional approach had always followed natural breeding cycles, which meant more piglets in spring and fewer in winter. We should talk to Professor Yoon, Jae-young suggested. The agricultural scientist had become a trusted advisor. The professor arrived with 2 students and a stack of research papers. They spread them across the dining table that had seen so many important decisions. Year-round production without compromising your methods. Professor Yoon tapped her chin thoughtfully. Challenging but not impossible. We'd need to modify your breeding program while maintaining genetic diversity. For hours, they discussed options. The professor sketched diagrams of breeding rotations and housing modifications. The students took notes and asked thoughtful questions. By evening, they had the outline of a plan that would allow more consistent production while still honoring the traditional approach to raising the pigs. The biggest risk, Professor Yoon warned, is losing the special qualities of your meat in the rush to produce more. We'll need to monitor carefully, test regularly. Min-ho nodded seriously. Quality comes first. If we can't maintain that, the deal makes no sense. The next morning, Min-ho called the hotel's purchasing director. We're interested, he said, but we need to discuss some details. Would it be possible for someone to visit our farm? A week later, a sleek black car pulled up to their farmhouse. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, looking slightly uncomfortable in the farm environment. He was followed by an older Japanese man in chef's whites, who immediately seemed more at ease. I am Chef Tanaka. The older man introduced himself with a bow. From Grand Palace, Tokyo. I have been cooking for 40 years. I want to see these special pigs for myself. While the purchasing director stayed in the farmhouse reviewing contracts with Jae-young, Min-ho took Chef Tanaka on a tour. The chef asked intelligent questions about feed, living conditions, and slaughter methods. He insisted on walking through every part of the operation, taking photos and making notes. At lunch, Jae-young served a simple meal showcasing their pork. The chef closed his eyes as he tasted, concentrating deeply. In Japan, he finally said, there is a concept called terroir borrowed from French wine, but we apply to all food. It means you can taste the place where food comes from. Your pork has strong terroir. I taste Jeju Island, the soil, the air, the traditions. This is what our customers pay for. By the time the visitors left, they had reached an agreement. The Kims would supply Grand Palace hotels with a fixed quantity of pork monthly, slightly less than originally requested, but at an even higher price. The contract would start small and grow gradually as the farm increased production, giving them time to adapt without compromising quality. That night, Min-ho and Jae-young sat on their porch, watching the sunset over their farm. I'm still in shock, Jae-young admitted. A contract with Grand Palace. Do you remember when we couldn't even get local restaurants to buy from us? Min-ho smiled. I remember when we couldn't get a loan for 6 pigs. Implementing the new plan required more work than they had imagined. With guidance from the university team, they adjusted their breeding schedule to provide more consistent litters throughout the year. They built new housing that maintained the pigs' welfare while accommodating more animals. They hired 4 more workers from their village to help manage the expanded operation. Most challenging was creating a blockchain-based tracking system that would allow customers to verify the authenticity of their meat. Every pig was given a unique identifier. Records of its breeding, feeding, and processing were uploaded to a secure database. Customers could scan a code on the packaging to see the complete history of the meat on their plate, from birth to butchering. 6 months after signing the contract, they shipped their first order to Japan. Watching the refrigerated truck pull away from their farm, Minho felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. "Do you think they'll like it?" he asked his wife. The answer came a week later in an email from Chef Tanaka. "Our guests are amazed by the flavor. 3 have asked to visit your farm to see where such extraordinary pork comes from. The story of your pigs touches their hearts as much as the meat pleases their palates." Word spread among luxury hotel chefs. Soon, inquiries came from Singapore, Hong Kong, even a famous restaurant in Paris. They couldn't supply everyone, but they carefully selected partners who shared their values and were willing to pay for true quality. By diversifying across countries, they protected themselves from regional economic fluctuations. When tourism slowed in Japan one season, increased orders from Singapore filled the gap. 4 years into their farming journey, their annual revenue reached $1.4 million. But more satisfying than the money was seeing their vision become reality, proving that traditional farming methods could succeed in the modern world.